cables, underground structures, direct buried cable, risers, and supply cable termination. So last time yung discuss natin is all about the safety rules for underground supply lines and communication lines. No, for ngayon, so we'll go to the um, underground structures. No, so yung mga underground structures that supported our conductors or cables. If the cable also is not put in a conduit, so hindi siya nakalagay sa conduit, directly buried lang. Ano yung mga standard? The risers, so the termination between galing sa underground papunta sa taas, that is the risers, and the supply cable termination, kung paano i-terminate at kung ano yung mga identification mark na dapat nakalagay sa ating mga cables, no? In order for the operator or for the maintenance crew to know alin doon yung communication lines at alin doon ang supply lines. Okay, so let's proceed with the wala yung PowerPoint ko dito. Okay, so let's proceed with the first um, standard, no, or the first article. Ayan, bakit hang yung PowerPoint dito. Okay, yan. Okay, so we have cable in underground structures. Yeah, so that will be our first set of standards. No? So cables in underground structures. Okay, so in general, so this article or these standards apply to supply cables in underground structures. So meaning those insulated conductors or those cables that serves as a supply line wherein they are put in underground structures. So for system operating above 2 kV, consider grounded shields or sheets in metallic conduits. So part pa rin ng ng mga standards na to is yung mga system, no, yung kanilang operating voltage 2 kV underground, even if they are grounded shields or sheets, tapos kahit pa naka non-metallic ang kanilang conduit. So they are still part of the cables in underground structure na standards. Okay. So we have the installation. So in general, control bending during handling, installation, and operation to avoid damage. So as much as possible, no, during the handling of your cables or during the installation, so dapat hindi talaga siya nabibend to its or beyond, no, lagpas ng kanyang bending radius. So that is to avoid damage. So limit pulling tensions and sidewall pressure on supply cables to prevent damage. So yung pulling tension, no, yung talagang nabibinat or talagang napupul na yung ating cable, no, kasi magiging way yun for the cable to sustain damage. Pati yung mga sidewall pressures, so yung na press siya against its structure, no? Kunyari, nasa ilalim ng lupa, tapos yung kabilang gilid is concrete, tapos na-push siya dun sa concrete, so that is considered as sidewall pressure. So as much as possible, that will be avoided to prevent damage. Then duct should be clean to avoid damage during pulling operations, no? So dapat yung mga ducting natin, so it must be clean during pulling, so hindi magiging sanhi yung mga debris na nasa ating ducts that will damage our cable. So cable lubricants must not be detrimental to cable or conduit systems. So if we are going to use lubricant to facilitate the pulling of our cable, so dapat hindi siya detrimental, meaning hindi siya nagre-react doon sa insulation ng ating cable. Yan. Consider restraining cables on slopes or vertical runs to prevent downhill movement. So if in case that our cable is on nadaan siya sa pa-slope, no? Pa-slant or pa-vertical, pataas. So dapat meron tayong way, no, to support, no? So if in case pwede natin gamitan ng cable tie or tawag doon, pwede natin gamitan ng strap para yung ating cable will not be going pababa, no? Hindi siya pababa, which will be cause na mag-clog yung yung ating ducting or yung dadaanan ng ating cable. So do not install supply cables in the same duct with communication cables unless operated by the same utility. So hindi pwede install yung supply cables in parallel or in the same ducting for communication cables, no? Katulad pa rin yan doon sa ating conduit, no? If our communication cables is nakadaan sa conduit, so hindi pwedeng same conduit pareho yung supply cable at communication cable, no? Communication cables can be installed together in the same duct with agreement among involved parties. So pwede siya, the exception, katulad din sa conduit, no? The exception is if the communication company and the utility company o yung nagbibigay nung or yung may-ari ng supply cable is they are in agreement, no, na pwede at the same ducting or at the same raceway or at the same conduit ang kanilang dalawang uh, klase ng cables. Okay, so cable in manholes and vaults. Okay, so supports. So cable supports must withstand live and static loading and be compatible with the environment. So the support with doon sa ating manhole mismo could withstand static, no? So meaning yung mismong weight ng ating cable including the weight, no, of the tawag doon, yung kaniyang cover sa taas or the live, no, yung mismong live yung mga dadaan na mga kunyari manhole or vaults, no. So kunyari nasa ilalim siya ng street, no, sa sidewalk. So dapat could also withstand the moving load, no, sa tao or sa sasakyan, and also compatible with the environment. So if the environment is corrosive, so our cable supports must be also resistant to corrosion or non-corrosive na mga material. So maintain specified clearance between cables. So the same clearance applicable to cables in conduits are the same din na clearance na applicable for cables um, in underground or in raceways, no? Horizontal runs of supply cables will be supported at least 75 mm above the floor or suitably protected. So yung kanyang support ng kanyang horizontal run should be supported, no, at least 75 mm above floor. So 75 mm above the surface of the floor or yung sa ilalim ng ating floor, dapat meron tayong support for our cable. Exception, so this rule does not apply to grounding or bonding conductors. So if our bonding or grounding conductors, there's no need for that to have a support, no? Special protection may be necessary at the duct entrance, no? So sa entrance ng ating ducting, so dapat meron tayong nilagay na special protection that is to prevent damage, no, to our cable. So clearance. So adequate working space as per rule 4.3 and 4.3, 4.2. So ito yung last time, no? The horizontal clearance shall not be less than 900 mm and the vertical clearance not less than 1.83 meters. So ito yung adequate clearance, no, for supply cable on the underground. So clearance between supply and communication facilities are specified in table 4.5.2.2b2e. So ito mamaya meron tayong copy ng table na to. So joint use manholes or vaults require concurrence from all concerned parties. So if our manholes are to be used with two or more company, so dapat meron silang in agreement, no? Agreement na they could use both of the manholes. So rack separately on separate walls avoid crossing. So dapat yung mga cables, especially also the cables that could be accessed to the manhole should be separated properly at dapat it will not be on crossing. So hindi siya doon nagko-cross sa ating manhole. If on the same wall, supply cable should be below communication cable. So if the same wall, So yung yung supply cable, dapat nasa ilalim siya ng communication cable. Now, for example, if this will be our wall, no? Yan. So ito yung ating wall. So if this is our communication cable, no? Communication cable, okay? Then sa baba nito, that will be our supply cable. And the clearance for that one, no, kaya itong clearance kaya applicable to is that this is vertical clearance. So this will be 1.83 meters. Yan. So facilities should allow access to either without moving the other. So ibig sabihin, if itong communication cable, we are going to troubleshoot this one. So we could troubleshoot or pwede nating putulin to yung part na ito ng ducting without hindering or without damaging itong supply cable na sa baba, no? Or without moving this one, no? Na ito ding supply cable na to is iaano din natin, kailangan din nating bunutin. Yan. Okay, so ito yung ating clearance. So I hope klaro, no? So clearance between supply and communication facilities in joint use manholes and vaults. So meron tayong face-to-face voltage. So ito yung line-to-line voltage natin, no? So 0 to 1 to 15,000 volts. So the surface to surface, no, na clearance is 150 mm. So for 15,000 15,001 to 50,000, that is 230 volts. So 50,000 to 120,000 volts, that is 300 mm. Tapos 120,000 and above must be 6,600 mm. Okay, so the identification, no? So how we are going to identify which of our cables is a communication cable at alin naman doon ang supply cable. So permanent identification of cables at each manhole or access opening. So meaning permanent, hindi natatanggal, no? Yung identification na yon. Exception not required if cable position is evident from the supply diagrams or maps. So if there is a diagram, no, consistent, no, so doon sa arrangement, the actual arrangement ng ating mga cables, so hindi na kailangan lagyan ng identification. Yung map or yung diagram na yung ipa-follow. So identification must be corrosion resistance and readable with auxiliary lighting. So ibig sabihin nun, so kunyari nasa ilalim, madilim. So meron siya talagang lighting na naka na, nasa malapit doon sa identification in order for that for that marking or identification na mabasa kahit madilim. Okay? So joint use manholes and vaults. So cables operated by different utility must have permanent identification denoting the utility name and the cable type. No? So if the manholes are used, no, by different company, no, magkaiba, so dapat ang kanilang mga wires or cables, dapat the identification must denote the name of the company at kung para saan yun na cable, either that is supply or communication cable. Okay, so grounding and bonding. So cables and joints with metallic shields, sheets, or concentric neutrals exposed to personal contact must be effectively grounded. So if our cables are metallic shields, tapos sheets or ang kanyang neutral are concentric, no, which is exposed, no, exposed doon sa ating personnel, so they must be effectively grounded. Then cables or sheets connected to ground at a manhole should be bonded or connected to a common point. So ito sa bonding, no? Dapat all of our cable that are connected to ground must also be bonded to the cover of the manhole, especially if the cover of the manhole is metal. Then bonding and grounding leads should be made of corrosion-resistant material suitable for the environment. So yung ating mga gagamitin, no, as the bonding or the grounding lead should be corrosion-resistant. So hindi siya tinatabla ng kalawang. Okay, fireproofing. So fireproofing, so that is the resistance to fire. is not mandatory but may be provided by each utility to offer protection from external factors. So hindi required no ng Philippine Electrical Code Part 2 to have our cable na sa underground to be fireproofed no o lagyan ng fireproofing, but um, it is also no encouraged na nakadepende na sa mga utility company to offer fireproofing para maproteksyonan against external fires or external factors. Then communication cables containing special supply circuits. So special circuits operating at voltage exceeding 90 volts AC or 150 AC, supplying solely for the communication equipment may be included in communication cable under specified conditions. So meaning ito yung mga supply, no? Supply circuit for our communication equipment, no? Katulad ng mga sa mga telephone na kailangan silang mayroong sariling DC voltage, no? Or sa fiber box kailangan may sariling DC voltage. So pwede na yung kanyang supply cable is isama na doon sa ating communication cable, no? With the specific conditions. So ano yung mga conditions na ito? So the first condition is cables with conductive sheets or shield must be effectively grounded. No? Tapos, each circuit in such cable should be carried on conductors individually, enclosed with an effectively grounded shield. So dapat all of those cables have their separate grounding shields, and also they must not be in contact. No? Walang live parts no, na makadikit sa kanila. All circuits owned or operated by one party and maintained only by qualified personnel. So yung supply circuit for the communication system and the communication line are owned by the same company. At ang pwede lamang mag-access nun is a qualified personnel which is authorized by the company. Supply circuits terminated at points accessible only by qualified employees. Then communication circuits brought out of such cables, if not terminating in a repeater station or terminus office, should be protected to limit the voltage of the communication circuit to 400 volts to ground in the event of cable failure. So, ibig sabihin, in case na may trouble or na-grounded yung supply circuit for the communication cable, so yung kanyang voltage to ground, no, or kanyang ground fault voltage should not be more than 400 volts. So dapat maglagay ng protection to limit no that voltage overcoming these 400 volts. Then terminal apparatus for power supply should be arranged to make energized parts inaccessible when supply circuits are energized. So yung mga terminal box, so dapat they are locked no during energized no yung kunyari may dadaan na may pinadaanan na siya ng kuryente, so they must be locked in order for the unnecessary or accidental contact to live parts. Then identification of such cable meeting relevant requirements outlined in Rule 4.5.2, yung identification kanina, no? That it will be also marked with the company name and also kung anong klase siya cable at kung para siya sa cable, no? Okay. So exception, so Rule 4.5.1 requirements do not apply. So the rule about the supply cables, supply circuit, no? Cables na kasama sa communication cable, no? That apply to communication circuit where the transmitted power does not exceeds 150 watts. So if hindi lalagpas ng 150 watts yung tinatransmit na power ng ating supply circuit for communication lines, so okay lang, no? Na tawag doon na they are okay lang hindi siya lagyan ng protection for tawag doon for ground fault, no? At yung grounding, no? Proper grounding of the circuit or the cables. So direct buried cable and cable in duct not part of a conduit system. So meaning ito yung mga cable na they are not part of a conduit system, no? So they are directly buried cable or nasa talaga sa ating ducting. Okay. So this article is applicable to direct buried cables. So supply cables operating above 600 volts to ground must have continuous metallic sheet or concentric neutral that is effectively grounded. Splices or joints in the metal shield, sheet, or neutral path must be made continuous but need not to be concentric. Cables of the same supply circuit may be buried with no deliberate separation. Okay. So, parang katulad din yung mga standard kanina. So, direct buried cables of the same circuit operating below 600 volts without an effectively grounded shield or sheet shall be placed in close proximity. So, if the circuit is below 600 volt, tapos wala silang um, grounded shield or sheet, so they could be placed in close proximity. So, kahit wala na separation. Communication cables containing special circuits supplying power to communication equipment shall be cables with conductive sheet or shield that must be effectively grounded and comply with the requirements of communication cables containing special supply circuits. So, ganun pa rin, no? They must have proper separation, tapos properly grounded. So, direct buried jacket supply cables above 600 volts and communication cable must be legibly marked according to the specified identification symbols. So, dapat yung um, kanilang mga markings are um, legibly. Ibig sabihin ng klarong-klaro yung kanilang marking. So the identification symbol should be intended or embossed, no? Indented or embossed. So talagang naka-emboss doon sa ating cable, the insulation part of our cable at intervals not exceeding 1 meter. So ito yung spacing between marking ng identification. Every 1 meter, so hindi lalagpas ng 1 meter, dapat makikita yung identification symbol, no, yung company at yung voltage. So rules in this article also apply to direct buried supply and communication cables installed in a duct not part of a conduit system. So ito yung example. So symbols for communication. So kaya yung nakalagay dito is telephone because this is for telephone line. Yung H is that is this the separation, no, of the height of the height and the spacing of the names and the name of the company and the voltage, no. So ito nakadepende na to sa utility company, no, kung ano yung bayon ng kanilang H. For supply cable, so ito yung nakalagay, no, ito yung symbol. Ganun pa rin yung H will depend on the on the utility company or the company itself, no? As long as kunyari yung H is sabihin nating 0.5, no? 0.5 mm. So dapat 0.5 mm ito 3H, so 3 times 0.5 mm at yan yung haba ng letter ng word na nilalagay dito. Kung ito yung name ng company, so dapat ganun yung haba. So it should not be below 3H, no? 3 times the height of the text itself. Okay. So the exceptions for this one, cables with jackets that cannot be effectively marked need not to be marked. So if the jacket itself could not be marked because if lalagyan natin ng emboss, no, baka masira yung insulation. So it does not it should not be required to be marked, no, para hindi masira yung insulation. So unmarked cable from stock existing prior to year 2000 can be used to repair unmarked direct buried jacketed supply cables and communication. So if the cable is made, no, prior to year 2000, no, kasi ang ano dito is from 2000 above, saka pa doon pwede lagyan yung nagkaroon ng insulation na pwede lagyan ng identification through emboss. So pwede gamitin yung mga cable na yon, that is only for repair purposes. Okay. So location and routing guidelines. So in the general principles, cable should be located to minimize practical disturbance, no? So yung cable natin dapat naka-arrange siya or naka-well place para hindi ma-disturb, no? Yung nasa taas pati yung ibang mga routing, no? Or ibang mga pipe or ibang mga ducting na dadaan doon sa underground with parallel to or direct over under other subsurface structure. So you must follow the rules of separation. So same doon sa rules, no? Last time about the separation. Kunyari, dadaan siya sa building, so there must be an adequate separation that is to not to create, no? Structural defect or magiging maapektahan yung structure ng ating building. Then in installation, so install cable in straight and direct line as practical. So hangga't maaari dapat yung ating cable which is direct buried or does not run on a conduit system, dapat it must be on straight line, no? As practical, no? As long as pwede siya i-straight line, so do it on straight line. If hindi naman, so bending radius when required should be sufficiently large to prevent damage to cable. So dapat kung ano yung nakalagay na bending radius for that specific cable, so mas mainam na yun yung sundin or mas mainam pa talaga nga mas higit pa doon sa bending radius. Okay, so safety and access. So route cable system to allow safe access for construction, inspection, and maintenance. No? So yung ating cable dapat naka-routing siya so that there will be safe access. So in terms na magdadagdag ng construction or may construction doon sa part ng yun ng sidewalk, so it will not be easily be part, no, or madamage siya nung mga construction ng doon. Or also during inspection and maintenance of our cables. Okay. So structural considerations. So we must determine the location of structures in the projected cable route path prior to trenching, plowing, or boring operation. No? So bago tayo maghukay, so if may dadaan natin ng mga structures, we must consider the location. No? If the soil na if ating i-trench could affect, no, the structure of the building. No? Kasi kailangan nating maghukay. No? So we will also consider the effect of the trenching or plowing or boring of the path, no, or para sa dalahan nating cable on the structure of our building na madadaanan. So natural hazards and other conditions in cable installation. So natural hazards. So routes through unstable soil, shifting sand dunes, or other natural hazards should be avoided. So hindi pwedeng maglagay ng underground cable, no, in unstable soil. Shifting sand dunes, no, yung mga mabuhangin na mga lupa or other natural hazards. So for example, fault lines, no, hindi pwede doon, no. Hindi pwedeng maglagay ng cable, no, underground cable. If burial areas with natural hazards is necessary, cable should be constructed and installed to withstand potential damage. So if wala talagang other way but to have your cable go, no, on that fault line or sa stable soil, so dapat there will be a way, no, to minimize, no, the effect of those unstable soil. The protective measure should become compatible with the local installations. So swimming pools, no? So other conditions tayo. Avoid installing supply cables within 1.5 meters of a swimming pool or its auxiliary equipment. So 1.5 meters from the swimming pool. If unattainable, provide supplemental mechanical protection. So when we say mechanical protection, so if hindi talaga pwede yung 1.5 meters, so medyo malapit-lapit talaga, so provide mechanical protection. So either insulate that one, tapos maglagay ka ng fencing for guard, tapos lagyan mo din ng GFCI na fault. In buildings and other structure, avoid direct installation of cable under building foundations. So sa mga foundation nating building, bawal yon. If necessary, support the foundation to limit the likelihood of transferring detrimental load on the cable. Then railroad tracks. So katulad pa yan. So mga dadaanan ng train. So avoid installing cables longitudinally under the ballast section of the railroad tracks. So yung nasa mismong ilalim ng railroad. If required, locate at a depth not less than 1.27 meters below the top of the rail. And exception clearance will be reduced by agreement if impractical. No, katulad pa ito nang di-discuss natin last week. So greater depth may be required in unusual conditions or if proposed construction interferes with existing installations. Tapos yung clearance under railroad tracks for cable crossing should adhere to the standards for clearance on railroad installation. So that will be not less than 2.87 meters if magko-cross siya sa railroad. No? Then highways and streets. So avoid longitudinal installation of cables under traverse surfaces of highways and streets. Ibig sabihin, dapat nakaparallel siya doon sa ating daanan. Hindi siya pwedeng mag-perpendicular or magko-cross sa mismong ating highway. If necessary, install in the shoulder or within the limits of one lane traffic to the extent practical. So kung pwede doon tayo sa sidewalk, in parallel with the sidewalk or doon sa pinaka point na sa pinakagilid na point ng ating road. Hindi advisable na doon sa gitna ng road doon natin idadaan yung ating supply cables and communication cables. Then submarine crossings, so route, install or boat submarine crossing to protect against erosion by tidal action or currents. So ganun pa rin, no? Katulad ng last time. Then avoid locations where ships normally anchor. Okay. Then trenching, so direct buried cable trenches should have a smooth undisturbed bottom. So yung mismong bottom ng ating trench, kunyari maghuhukay tayo, no? So the bottom itself must be smooth, no? Smooth yung ating bottom. So this should be smooth and undisturbed. Yeah. Protective measures like well-tempered backfill or rocky soils should be used. Backfill should be 100 mm of the cable. So should not damage it. Tapos yung ating backfill should be within 150 mm of the cable. Then plowing. So plowing in rocky soil should be avoided. So that the cable should be damaged during the operation. So cable plowing equipment design should prevent damage from bending, sidewall pressure, or excessive tension. Okay. Then boring, yung mismong paghuhukay. So boring installation in the soil that may damage the cable should ensure adequate cable protection. Yan. Then depth of burial. So the depth of burial should be sufficient to protect cables from expected surface usage. So if in case na talagang we will have a installation underground, so dapat i-consider natin na sa tamang lalim siya na few years from now baka yung iba yung surface nun, no? Yung shallow surface is pwedeng gamitin. So dapat doon talaga tayo sa sa depth na hindi talaga siya ma-disturb in case na yung surface is gagamitin, may mangyayaring construction doon sa itaas. So lesser depths are permissible with supplemental protection sufficient or expected usage. So duct strength may obviate the need for additional mechanical protection. Okay. So supply cable conductor and duct burial depth. So ito yung minimum depth for our cable sa leaving siya directly buried. So for voltage natin face to face, so 0 to 600 volts. So yung depth of burial niya is 600 mm, the minimum. 601 to 50,000 volts, that is 750 mm minimum. Tapos 50,001 and above na voltage, so that is 1,070 mm. So ito lahat are all minimum. So pwede kayong lumagpas pa, mas malalim pa dito. Okay. So installation, so if you have cable separation, so supply cable should not be in the same duct as communication cable unless operated and maintained by the same utility. So same pa rin kanina, no? As long as they are of different utility or different companies. So, hindi pwedeng magkasama yung supply cable at communication cable. Pero if isa lang, pwede lang. Communication cable may share a duct if the utilities involved agree. No? Sa the exception also, if yung dalawang company ay may agreement, so pwede silang magkasabay sa isang ducting or sa isang daanan. Okay, so deliberate separation, so equal to or greater than 300 mm. So if our separation of the supply and the communication cable is greater than 300 mm, so rules apply to radial separation of supply and communication cables from each other and other underground structure. So the separation equal to or greater than 300 mm is required. So yung minimum is 300 mm for this one. If crossings naman, no, crossings for this separation. So cable crossings under or over underground structure require suitable support to prevent detrimental load transfer. So ano pa yun? Kailangan hindi siya maka-affect, no, doon sa ating structure na nasa taas. Then parallel facilities, so installation directly over and parallel to another underground structure is allowed with agreement. Tapos meron siyang adequate vertical separation to separation para ma-access, no, during maintenance and without causing damage to our cable and to the installation itself. Tapos yung thermal protection, no, protection against heat, no. So install cables with sufficient separation from underground structure to avoid thermal damage. If clearance is impractical, use thermal barriers or thermal separators or heat sink, no, para hindi ma-damage yung ating cables. Okay? So tapos na to, no. Ano pala? Ako. Rewind ko. Okay, so if the separation is less than 300 mm, so rules apply for the radial separation of less than 300 mm. So radial separation from steam gas and flammable material should not be less than 300 mm. Dapat if mababa siya sa 300 mm tapos ang doon steam gas at flammable material, so you must correct the separation para maging more than siya ng 300. So exception for that one, if the operating voltage is not more than 300 volts, no, between conductors. So that is face to face. And also there must be an agreement, no, between the utility companies, between doon sa may-ari ng cable at yung doon sa mga steam or gas na mga pipeline na dadaan doon. So supply circuits above 300 volts to ground or 600 between conductors face to face must be constructed, operated, and maintained to promptly de-energize when faulted. So if this is the installation na less than 300 mm tapos 300 volts above, no, pataas, voltage to ground or face to face 600 volt above, so dapat meron siyang protection na in case may fault, automatic na mag-de-energize yung buong system or magti-trip yung buong system. So supply circuits above 300 volts, so ito tapos na to. Then communication supply cables buried in random separation can be treated as one system for considering separation from underground structures or facilities. Then deliberate separation, supply and communication cables may be buried together if the two parties agree. Yung ibang company will agree that they will have the same, no? Have the same routing. The grounding rules for supply cables. So grounded supply system shall not operate in excess of 22 kV to ground. Tapos pag undergrounded siya na supply system, no, shall not be operated in excess of 5.3 kilovolts face to face. So cable above 300 volts should be effectively shielded and maintained close to each other. Unguarded supply circuits above 300 volts will be requiring a ground fault indication system. Communication cables with metallic components must have continuous metallic shield. Tapos, adequate bonding, no, between grounded supply conductors and communication cable shields should be provided at intervals not exceeding 300 mm. Tapos, evaluation of communication circuit effects near supply station with large ground currents is necessary. So this is done tong NAS na dapat alam natin kung ano yung ground fault current. So that is to minimize interference. So in case na doon dadaan yung or nasa malapit yung ating communication circuit sa ating supply cable. Okay. Then grounded supply facilities above 300 volts should include a bare or semiconducting jacket neutral conductor. So dapat meron sa neutral conductor. So conductor options include a sheet, insulation shield, or multiple concentric conductors, or a separate conductor. So bare conductors in contact with the earth should be corrosion resistant. Tapos the radial resistivity of the semiconducting jacket should not exceed 100 ohm meter and remain stable in service. So ito yung resistance ng ating semiconducting jacket or ng ating insulation. Should not be or should not exceed 100 mm ohm meter. So meaning per meter 100 mm. 100 ohm per. Okay, so each phase conductor of a multi-grounded system should have effectively grounded copper concentric conductor. A concentric conductor should have a conductance not less than one-half of the phase conductor. So yung kanyang conductance should not be less than one-half, no? Sa mismong conductance ng ating main conductor. It should be adequate for expected fault current magnitude and duration. Insulating jacket grounded neutral supply cable in non-metallic duct may be laid with communication cable. So yung mga insulated natin na grounded wire which serve as the neutral for our supply cable, pwede siyang isama doon sa ating communication cables. Yan. So supply and communication cables will be buried with non-metallic water and sewer lines with no deliberate separation given agreement. So pwede na magkasama yung ating pipe, no, or our ducting for supply and communication cable, kasama siya sa line, no, sa linya ng para sa tubig at doon sa sewer system, as long as that is non-metallic at there is a given agreement. So kahit magkadikit sila, kahit walang separation, pwede. Okay. So additional rules for duct not part of a conduit system. So duct material should be corrosion resistant. Yung ating ducting must be corrosion resistant. Dapat free from sharp objects or burrs, so that is to avoid damaging the insulation of our cable. Should limit entry of solid matter and have continuous smooth interior surface. So kaya during the installation, so wala tayong tinatawag kapag underground, wala tayong tinatawag na cable tray, no? Kasi yung cable tray that is open. So pwedeng makapasok doon ng mga solid matter. Kaya ang ginagamit ng taga is cable ducting. No? So ducts through building walls should have seals and gas venting devices to prevent gas entrance and pressure buildup. Okay. Then we have risers, no? So risers. So yung mga pa-vertical na mga cable installations. So this is still sa underground. So magkaiba talaga yung risers para dun sa para sa dun sa overhang, magkaiba din sa underground. So mechanical protection for supply conductors or cable required by the code. So again, kailangan may mechanical protection. So that is our strap or our support for the cable. Protection should extend at least 300 mm below ground level. So dapat the interval is at least 300 mm. Supply conductors or cables so should rise vertically from the cable trench with reasonable bending radius. So as again, galing sa horizontal, no, galing sa ilalim ng lupa, no? Tapos kunyari dito yung ating building. Yan. So we are ang ating so this is the grid line or ito yung level ng lupa. So galing dito yung at sa baba yung ating yung ating supply conductor. So if that will go up, so talagang magbe-bend yan, no? Ito yung kanyang bend. So dapat this is a sufficient bending radius. So Purpose of that is to avoid damage to our supply conductors or cable. So exposed conductive ducts or guards containing supply conductors or cable should be effectively grounded. So in case pag akyat dito banda may exposed, no, na part ng ating ducting, so that should be grounded, no, effectively grounded. Okay. So conductors or cable should be supported to limit the likelihood of damage. Then when entering riser pipe or elbow, installation should minimize damage due to relative movement of the cable and the pipe. So if pole risers, ibig sabihin ng pole risers, yung kanyang yung kanyang puntahan pataas is a pole, no, or poste. Risers should be located on poles considering climbing space and minimizing exposure to traffic damage. So kasagaran nangyayari ito sa mga street light. Now, if our supply ng ating street light is underground, so dapat we must consider, no, the climbing space at i-minimize ang exposure to traffic ng ating conductor na pataas. No? Number, size, and location of riser ducts or guards should be allow adequate access for climbing. Pad-mounted installation, so meaning yung ating mga equipment is naka-pad mounted, so nandun sa surface. Supply conductors or cable rising from trench to transformers, switchgear, or other equipment on mounted pads should not bear on the edges of the holes through the pad or the edges, bends, or other ductwork below the pads. So meaning, dapat yung ating entrance should be, yung ating the entrance, no, between the equipment and the conductor should not be placed in such a way na pwedeng ma-damage yung support o yung pad ng ating equipment. Cables entering pad material should be maintained at an adequate depth for the voltage characteristics until protected directly under the pad or other suitable mechanical protection. Then supply cable terminations. So how we are going to terminate, no, our supply cables. Okay. So cable termination should meet 4.4.4 requirements. So that is the article 4.4.4 in which there must be proper torque, no? Tama yung torque. Tapos the termination itself must be well guarded, no? It the the termination should be protected from corrosion. So riser terminations outside enclosure must ensure specific clearance from chapter 2 to chapter 3. Yung mga clearances on the termination. So gaano kalayo yung live to live na distances, no, which we discussed a few topics ago. Now, designed to prevent moisture penetration detrimental to the cable. Tapos, meron siyang suitable insulating barriers or fully insulated terminals required for reduced clearances. Okay, so support at termination, no? So insulation designed to maintain termination position. So dapat yung ating termination position, no, kung sa ating mag-terminate, dapat hindi siya yon nagagalaw, no? So it will be properly supported to avoid movement or vibration na pwedeng makakross ng lost contact. Cables supported to limit transfer of damaging mechanical stress. Okay, so the identification, so all terminations require suitable circuit identification. So dapat makikita doon sa sa malapit sa termination if anong kable 'yon, tapos para saan, no, at kung sino yung company. So this is not mandatory if positioned in conjunction with diagrams or maps. So ganun pa rin, no? If you have the diagram, you have the map, so which is clear enough that madaling maintindihan, so no need to put identification on the terminal box or on the termination of our supply cables. So clearance in enclosure or volts. So maintain adequate clearance between conductors and ground based on the terminator type. In enclosure with exposed live parts, so provide clearances for insulating barrier suitable for voltage and designs BIL, no, or the breakdown voltage, no, which this one na may table tayo dito dati do sa chapter 3 discussion natin. Uninsulated live parts permissible in volt terminations if they are guarded and isolated. In the grounding, so ganun pa rin, all exposed conductive surface should be grounded, banded, or both. Tapos yung conductive structure of supporting cable termination must be also grounded. Exception, so there will be no grounding if those parts are isolated or guarded. Then you have the equipment, no, yung ating mga underground equipment or directly buried no, supply cable. Okay? So those equipment includes buses, no, yung ating mga bus bars, transformers, switches for electrical supply, repeaters, lo- loading cords for communication and auxiliary equipment. So joint use manhole installation requires agreement from all parties. Tapos the supporting structure should be designed no, to sustain the expected load from our equipment. So pad-mounted equipment and above-ground enclosures located at least 1.2 meters from fire hydrants. No? Yung kanyang distance ng ating mga pad-mounted equipment doon sa surface must be at least 1.2 meters from the fire hydrants. In which if ang kanyang exception pwede siya 900 mm if there is an agreement between the fire department and the utility company. So the design, so the equipment must be expected to be thermal, chemical, mechanical, and environmental conditions no for the equipment. So dapat siya suited no for whatever requirement no between the thermal, yung init, chemical, hazard, mechanical, and environmental conditions. All equipment must design to withstand normal, emergency, and fault conditions. So switches should have clear indications marked on the handles for operating directions. Remotely controlled or automatic devices should have a local provisions to render them inoperable in case there is hazard. In enclosures with fuses and interrupter contacts designed for normal, emergency, and fault conditions. So tools used for energized devices should have space or barriers for adequate clearance. Tapos yung pad-mounted equipment natin and above-ground equipment should be locked or secured to disallow the uh, entry of unauthorized personnel. So access to exposed energized parts above 600 volts requires separate conscious access. Meaning, if the live parts is above 600 volts, so dapat it should be uh, lockable. No? So dapat nakalock siya na kahit sino, kahit qualified person, as long as he doesn't have the key, hindi niya pwedeng ma-access yung mga live parts, no? Yung mga equipment which is operated above 600 volts. Okay, location in underground structure. So equipment should not obstruct personal access, opening, or interfere with the egress in the manholes or vaults. So meaning, doon sa baba, no? Doon sa ating sa kunyari meron tayong mga subway system. So if we will have our equipment there, so dapat hindi siya naka-obstruct no, doon sa dadaanan o naka-obstruct doon sa entrance or the exit of our manholes or vaults. So the minimum of 200 mm distance to the back of the fixed ladders should not interfere with ladder use. An arrangement in manholes or vaults should permit installation, operation, and maintenance. The switching device with one wall or electrical operation should be operable from a safe conditions. Tapos yung equipment natin should not interfere with drainage or ventilation of our underground structure. Okay, so provisions. There must be provisions for lifting, rolling, and mounting should be adequate for weight of the device. So dapat kahit nasa underground structure na siya, pwede nating ma-lift or ma-roll or ma-mount or ma-transfer yung ating equipment. So the structure itself must be designed to allow that space, no? Live parts guarded or isolated to limit the contact, no? Limit contact. Then operating levers, inspection, and test facilities visible and accessible without moving permanent connection. Tapos yung live parts must be isolated or protected from exposure to conducting liquids. So lalo na may mga may mga leaking doon sa ating underground structure, no? Operating controls of supply equipment accessible to unauthorized personnel should be secured. Then again, grounding and banding tayo of our equipment on underground structure. So cases and enclosure must be made of conductive material and should be grounded or guarded. So guards constructed of conductive materials effectively grounded also. Tapos yung bonding between metallic supply and communications enclosures within 18 meters excluding pole ground. So within 18 meters dapat those enclosures must be bonded, no, at effectively grounded. So identification. So transformers, regulators, or similar equipment operating in multiple tags should be identified using tags, diagrams, or other suitable means. So dapat meron talaga siyang tag to know if this transformer is for supply utility or for communication utility. Okay. Then installation in tunnels. So sa tunnels na tayo. Okay. So installation of tunnels must meet chapter requirements and be supplemented or modified by this article. No? So when we say chapter requirements, yung mga requirements, no, all about underground installations, no, because a tunnel itself is considered as an underground installation. So meron lang mga specialized or mga additional supplemented na requirements. So if space is accessible to non-qualified person or if supply conductors does not meet chapter 3 requirements, so dapat i-follow talaga yung chapter 3. So meaning, if ito yung nangyari, so dapat baguhin yung mismong structure ng ating tunnel. Agreement among all concerned parties is required for the tunnel structure design and proposed installation. Okay, so the environment of our tunnel. So design for tunnels accessible to the public or workers exclude controlled safe conditions. So include self-controlled safe conditions. So if there is public or uh, public na pwede dumaan sa ating tunnel, so they must be accessible, no? Kahit pa those may part doon na kunya may dadaan doon na mga supply cable or communication cable, no? So of course the tunnel must be accessible kasi kadalasan sa mga tunnel to are used for sa mga road, no, sa mga highways, no. So controlled environment considerations. So dapat the area should be um, free from poisonous or suffocating atmospheres, no. Tapos may protection from fumes, fire, explosion, and high temperature. Tapos prevention of unsafe conditions due to induced voltage. So, mismo sa ating supply cable, kapag may dumaan sa ating tunnel na tao, baka biglang kuryente dahil sa taas nating induced voltage. So limit hazards due to flooding. Ensured ingress with two directions provided. So dapat magkabilaan if tunnel, pag nag-entrance ka dun sa kabilang side, talagang lalabas ka sa kabilang side. No? Working space meeting specified dimensions and safeguard against vehicular and machinery operation. Tapos unobstructed walkways, no, or sidewalks for workers in tunnels. Then, conditions of occupancy in multiple use tunnels. Ibig sabihin ito maraming gumagamit sa tunnel na yon. No? So, coordination of design and installation for safe operation of supply and communication facilities in multiple use tunnels. So, dapat mag-usap-usap yung mga company, pati yung mga government agency na gagamit sa tunnel na yon. Tapos, consider the safe environment considerations. No? So, means to protect equipment from humidity or temperature effects, means to protect the equipment from liquid or gas leaks. Then we have the coordinated design and operation of corrosion control system. Okay, so that will be all for the final provisions for our chapter 4 PEC part 2. So natapos natin lahat ng mga underground installation. So from underground installation on wires inside a conduit, tapos yung underground structures, yung first na diniscuss natin ngayong gabi, no? Yung mga directly buried, tapos yung sa ducting, tapos yung talagang sa mismong trench, no? Or sa underground structures. Tapos the last one is on the provisions on installations of supply and communication cables on tunnels. Okay? So for that, we will take siguro 15-minute break. So balik tayo ng 9 p.m. for our weekly evaluation, weekly test on our discussion for this evening. Kung sino naman yung highest, so again, you will have a prize, no? May prize. Tapos, yung sa pala, practice test. So, yung sinabi ko, you must be able to padamihan ng top 1, no? Until December doon sa practice test, padamihan ng highest score, no? Kasi yung makakakuha ng highest score, so the prize is 570 ES na Casio calculator, which is acceptable for the board exam. So ipapadala yan, no, kung sino naman yung highest, no, sa lahat ng practice test, beginning practice test 5 hanggang sa last na practice test natin ngayong December. Okay? So we'll take a 15-minute break muna. We'll back at 9 p.m. for our weekly evaluation. Okay? So break muna tayo. No? Okay? Okay, so what is the primary consideration for installing supply cables in underground structures? So we have our choices here: temperature, resistance, corrosion protection, compliance with the PEC Part 2 standards, or cable color. So 45 seconds to answer. Okay, correct answer is letter. So the correct answer is letter C. No? So lahat po ay nakakuha ng tamang sagot. Compliance with the PEC Part 2 standards. So dito tayo sa ating leaderboard. Ito ko sino yung pinakamabilis na nakapag-answer. And ko lahat mabilis kasi lahat for 1,000. Next question. In ducts, what must be considered to prevent damage during pulling operations? So choices: cable lubricants, pulling tension, sidewall pressures, or duct cleaning frequency. Okay, the correct answer is letter C, no? Sidewall pressure. So, kaya ko consider para hindi ma-damage kasi yung sidewall pressure yan yung nagpe-press dun sa ating cable. Okay, so sadly, wala nakakuha ng tamang sagot. Yan, same pa rin yung ating leaderboard, no? Next. So what clearance is recommended between horizontal lines of supply cables and the floor in manholes or vaults? So is it 50 mm, 100 mm, 75 mm, or 200 mm? Okay, the correct answer is so letter C, no? 75 mm. Okay, so yung ating top 1 is si Sir Brian. Yung top 2 is si Sir Ryan. Okay, next. Under what conditions can communication cables be installed together with supply cables in the same duct? So, ano yung condition para pwede silang magsama? Always. So, always ba yung condition? With proper lubrication only if operated by different utilities or with agreement among involved parties. Okay, so the correct answer is so letter D, no? And okay. Next, what is the key consideration for the identification of cables in joint use manholes and vaults? Okay, so the correct answer is letter B, no? Utility name and cable type. Yun, lahat nakakuha pa ng tamang sagot. Tulad kanina. Yan. Ganun pa rin yung nangyari sa ating top 1 at top 2. Okay. So what rule is not applicable for direct buried cables of the same circuit operating below 600 volts. Ito medyo mahirap-hirap to na ano, question. Okay, so the correct answer is letter B, no? Continuous metallic shield. Yan, so medyo nahati yung sino nakakuha ng tamang sagot. Okay, yan. So may bago na tayong top 1, si Sir Ryan. Okay, next. What should be done to cables in areas with natural hazards, such as unstable soil or shifting sand dunes? Alin dito? So, install without protection, avoid installation, increase cable exposure, or use additional lubrication. Okay, so the correct answer is letter B, avoid installation. Okay, yan. So, ganun pa rin yung top 1 natin at top 2. Next question. What is the primary purpose of fireproofing for underground cable? In which case are reduced radial separations allowed for supply communications and cable? A. So the correct answer is so above 600 volts. Okay, yan. So may bago na tayong top 1. Okay, next. What is a requirement for grounding grounded bare or semiconducting jacketed neutral supply cable? Okay, so the correct answer is letter A, adequate resistivity of the semiconducting jacket. And next, what must be considered for equipment installation in manholes or vaults? Okay, the correct answer is letter B, accessibility for maintenance. And the next question. What clearance is recommended between supply and communication facilities based on table 4.5.2b2e? Okay, so the correct answer is letter B, 900 mm is the minimum clearance. Okay, pa rin. Next, what should when should thermal protection be considered for cables in close proximity to each other? Okay, so the correct answer is letter C, when clearance is impractical. And, okay, next. What depth is recommended for the burial of supply and communication cables under railroad tracks? Okay, so the correct answer is, so letter B, 1.27 meters. And yun na bago yung top 1 at 2. Okay, next. What is the primary purpose of controlled safe environment consideration in tunnels? Okay, correct answer is, so letter C, ensure safety for workers and the public. All of you got the correct answer. Okay, next. In multiple use tunnels, what should be the coordinate to provide a safe environment for supply and communication facilities? Correct answer is, so letter B, design and installation. So yan, nakahabol na po tayo yung number 1. Okay, next question. What is recommended distance between supply cables and fixed ladders in underground structures? Okay, so the correct answer is, so letter D, 300 mm. Yan, so maintain yung ating number 1, no? Tapos may bago na po tayong top 2. What is the primary purpose of cable lubricants during pulling operations? Okay, so the correct answer is letter C, minimize cable damage. Okay, so ganun pa rin yung ating top 1 at top 2. Next, what must be provided for communication circuits in cables containing special supply circuits to limit the voltage in case of cable failure? Okay, so the correct answer is so letter B, thermal, di ba? So, thermal barriers. No? Barriers. Okay. Yan. So, ganun pa rin yung ating top 1. This will be the last question. In joint use manholes and vaults, what is the required for cables operated by different utilities? Okay, so the correct answer is so letter agreement from all concerned. So, tingnan natin kung sino yung nag-top 1. Yun, nakahabol pala yung isa, no? Si Sir Naldo. Okay. So, medyo madikit yung laban natin. Okay? So, Sir Ronaldo, yun.